Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So this series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, April 15th, 1996. It actually took place on April 16th. An episode of The Oprah Winfrey Show airs in which the talk show host proclaims that she would no longer eat hamburgers. This was during a segment with a man named Howard Lyman, a cattle rancher turned vegetarian activist. Lyman was describing a disease called bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which from now on I'm going to call BSE. I will never have to say those 3 words again. But BSE is also known as mad cow disease. We will call it mad cow disease from now on. It was a disease that was spreading in the UK. Millions of cows had been ordered to be slaughtered. A number of people had died as a result of eating tainted beef. And on the show, Lyman argued that the danger was growing in the United States. And in response, Winfrey said, quote, "This has stopped me cold from eating another burger." On the very day the show aired, cattle futures on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange plunged. That is the power of Oprah. And this incident would lead to a huge saga. Winfrey would get sued. There was a huge high-profile trial. All sorts of free speech questions coming up around this. So a really fascinating topic. Here to talk about Oprah Winfrey, mad cows, and the veggie libel laws are, as always, Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
We've all been very excited to talk about this. This has been on our list for a long time. Incredibly fascinating. Probably could be like a 5-parter, honestly.
I was about to say, Kellie and I are hijacking this and turning this on into a This Day in Oprah history.
Yeah, spin-off.
Podcast.
And one of the reasons we're excited about this is because, Kellie, we learned as we were plotting this, you're a bit of an Oprah obsessive, huh?
Oh, I'm the ultimate. I'm the ultimate fan. I have watched Oprah. I can't even remember when I first started. It's just always been, and I just remember, I watched until her very last episode. But this one I remember in particular because there was so much controversy around it. She moved her show from Chicago to Amarillo, Texas. I mean, this was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that for people who didn't really pay attention to Oprah before or thought that maybe this is just like a housewives show, they tuned in because of the court case that was happening. And I dare to say she gained even more viewership because of this legal action.
So we'll get into the trial and the sort of way that Oprah really takes advantage of it. And but to that point, paint the picture of who Oprah is in 1996. Who is 1996 Oprah, and what is her cultural power?
Oh, man. Oprah is probably the leading #1 talk show host in the country. She has the Midas touch. So everything that she says, everything that she loves explodes and sells like crazy. And we found in this particular incident, the things that she's not a fan of, the things that she does not like, plummet. And so we saw that when she, says to her national audience, I'm never going going to eat beef again. And we see what happens with the stock market. I mean, that right there was so indicative of the popularity that she had, but also the sway that she could get people convinced to also not eat beef as well. But I will say that part of Oprah's, sort of appeal is that this was not just something that she took on as part of like her diet. Everyone knows how she's, constantly dieting and things of that nature. But she brought on experts to talk about mad cow disease and what was happening to these cows and how these cows had consumed, body parts of sheep, that their diet was toxic. And that for her was enough to say no more.
Yeah, it's interesting because there had been so much attention in the late 1980s and into the 1990s about Winfrey's weight and her diet and all of these things. But when she gets thrust into the spotlight here, it really is about public health in a lot of ways. Yeah. And her sort of spontaneous reaction. Like, I don't think that she was coming on the show planning to be like, never going to eat another burger again. But it is disgusting to hear about cows eating sheep, cows eating other cows, and that kind of like forced cannibalism, which is really gross. And then the effects that it had on people, that mad cow disease could jump into humans and kill people in really awful ways.
And did kill people. 20 people die in Europe as a result of mad cow disease.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of gets lost in the conversation here because it turns into this huge trial and scandal and so forth. But, the heart of it, the journalism, if you want to call it that, the heart of it really was legit in many ways. There was some real fears here, and there was a real conversation to be had. One thing I just want to point out, this may be a little too semiotic or whatever, but, the way that Oprah actually frames this on the show, I think tells you a lot about her power, because she doesn't like turn to the camera and say, that's it, I'm never eating meat again. She actually, if you look at the moment, she turns to the audience and says, who else is really scared by this? I know I am. And that's the power of Oprah, is that she's talking to the audience and her community is coming with her. It's not all about her, right?
She's our friend.
Right, exactly. But just that little moment where she does it through the audience's reaction, not her own take, is like really powerful.
I'm definitely here for the Oprah semiotics. Like her ability to connect with her audience and empathize with her audience on an emotional and kind of therapeutic level is what makes her so powerful. And so in that moment, her kind of, not just revulsion, but as you're talking about like that connection through revulsion is a really powerful force and sets her up for this lawsuit, because the power of Oprah is kind of what's being tested out in the courtroom.
Yeah. So what is, Kellie, the reaction, and how do we get to a lawsuit here?
Yeah, so basically there were laws on the books called veggie libel. So the veggie libel laws made a person liable for making false statements about the safety of food. And so the Texas legislature passes this law in 1995. And, a lot of the pushback against Oprah was that she was peddling lies, that she was saying that the meat was not safe, that the meat was toxic or bad, which is not entirely untrue. But because the beef industry was hurt so much by this, they used it as an attempt to file suit against her using veggie libel laws.
Right. The basic idea was that they wanted to make laws that said you couldn't say anything disparaging about perishable products. So this comes up a little bit when, is it George H.W. Bush says he doesn't like broccoli, and there's a big to-do with broccoli farmers. But basically the idea is that you can't, they have to make it like you can't lie about this product. You can't spread rumors and create fears around a perishable product, because people will lose a lot of money. But it's also just a way of the cattle industry, which is a huge industry in Texas, flexing its muscle to make sure that people don't say anything bad about beef. And then it gets tested out in court, as you might imagine, because in the United States of America, we have a First Amendment right to say bad things about beef. That's the Oprah defense.
I'm not a legal expert, but I think that this, like, the notion that it's a libel about stuff that's perishable is really fascinating to me, just because it means that, like, your comments in real time can affect something in a way that maybe if you talked about how you didn't like a car or some other good, I don't know. We'll have to kick this over to some legal podcast to describe why the perishable is so important, but that clearly seems to be at the heart of the veggie libel laws. And as we see again, it has an effect. Cattle futures drop, people stop eating meat and so forth. But let's advance to the trial itself.
So, yeah, they tried to settle out of court. The beef industry is suing her for $10 million. That's no money to sneeze at. And so when Oprah's sort of like, we're not settling, like this is ridiculous, it goes to court. The judge rules in the favor of Oprah, basically saying that, no, this is not about veggie libel laws, that, she did not do anything wrong in making this statement, and that furthermore, she did not intend to do harm by making this statement. And I think that's really important as well, that it's not something where, sort of backstage are saying, okay, and we're going to have this moment and I'm going to say, this is gross. It was clear that it was a spontaneous judgment that she made after speaking to her expert guest on the show. And so she really comes out of this moment, victorious, and feels, I guess you could say, liberated as a result of the judgment.
But we should back up and we should talk about how she descends on Amarillo, Texas, because this is just amazing stagecraft and image management and just this amazing thing, right? Brilliant. She has to testify in this local Amarillo court. So what does she do? As Kellie was telling us earlier, she ups her show. She comes down to Amarillo, Texas, and even though there is this campaign against her, right, there are these bumper stickers that say things like "the only mad cow in Amarillo is Oprah." Not nice. But you also have hundreds of thousands of adoring fans in this fairly small Texas city who just they line the streets. It's like a presidential motorcade going through town. Mm-hmm. And the people who are prosecuting this lawsuit are looking around and they're like, oh, this is not great.
I mean, not only that, but she wears cowboy hats. She speaks with the Texas drawl. She brings Patrick Swayze on. He teaches her how to two-step. I mean, she is, spotlighting and highlighting all the wonderful things about Texas. And so it makes it hard to sort of dump on someone when they're throwing so much love and adoration your way. But everybody wants some of the Oprah's Midas touch. Yeah.
Well, you read quotes from people in Amarillo at the time, and they're like, yeah, Oprah's comments totally decimated our local economy, but, she's Oprah. We really love her. And, so it sort of worked. But to that point, is what she's doing here, on the one hand, there's just the genius of everything is content, right? And so we can get a week of programming out of this. Great. We're going to do it. Do you actually think, though, she's also trying to influence the trial and interfere?
Yeah, I think so. Well, she can't. Okay, there's a gag order put in place, so she can't talk about it. But, in each episode, she sort of, again, looks at the audience and says, y'all know why I'm here. She doesn't have to sort of explain why the show is being shot there. And I think there is a lot of, I would say, maneuvering to get people endeared to her and endeared to her cause without at all being explicit about the purpose for her being there. That, to me, is brilliant. That, to me, is genius.
And you could imagine a world in which this backfires, in which the prosecutors are like, you want to see how influential she is? There are 30,000 people outside right now just clamoring to see this woman. But it doesn't backfire, in part because I think the law is really on her side here. But yeah, a trial about Oprah is just going to be tilted from the beginning. They had a really hard time, and they, in fact, could not find 12 people who had not seen the Oprah Winfrey show. And also, what does it mean to have a jury of your peers when you're Oprah Winfrey and you have no peers?
I know.
Oh, come on. Famous people go on trial all the time. I had you until that last line. But yes, I can imagine people in the jury box being like, oh, it's Oprah. But it ends up being both, obviously, this veggie libel thing, but it ends up being a real free speech conversation. And she, when she wins, she frames it that way, right? She comes out of the courtroom and, what is it that she says?
So she says, quote, "I will continue to use my voice. I believe from the beginning that there was an attempt to muzzle that voice. I come from a people who have struggled and died in order to have a voice in this country, and I refuse to be muzzled."
Wow. And then she says, my reaction to this is that not only does free speech live, it rocks. Which is a very 90s thing to say. It rocks.
But even more so, she says, "and I'm still off of hamburgers."
So, yeah.
She's just doubling down at that point.
But, how should we view this as a free speech case? And does it actually have an effect on free speech issues?
Look, free speech laws in the United States are very expansive. And over the course of the second half of the 20th century, they only got more expansive. And so what this fundamentally was a libel lawsuit. And in order to prove libel, you have to prove intent, that she was willingly misleading people, that there was a plan to lie and mislead people. And in the show itself, there were pro-beef voices. So it was just from the very start kind of a non-starter on the free speech front. But, she wasn't in terrible legal danger. But it was a case that obsessed Americans, and in a way, the ranchers did not get their $10 million, but they were already multimillionaires who brought this lawsuit. And they got to spread the message on national news day after day that there were no cases of mad cow disease in the U.S. and that the U.S. beef was safe. And so they were able to get a message out there. And whatever, they continue to make millions and millions of dollars in the cattle industry.
Yeah. I do think, though, that part of there was a knock-on conversation here, too, also about just expertise, right? I mean, this was the height of daytime TV. You have these panels. They're often filled with experts. Sometimes those people would just be kind of of dubious provenance, so to speak. But this is a good segue into, I think, a thing we should say as we wrap up here, though. Speaking of experts that appear on Oprah's show, Kellie, this is where...
Oh, my God.
This is where we get one of our most iconic Oprah extended universe characters.
Yes. So as a part of Winfrey's legal team, a jury consultant in the case, and he goes by the name of Phil McGraw. This is the start of Dr. Phil, ladies and gentlemen.
Oprah, what have you done?
McGraw. I know. I mean, when I saw this, I was sort of shocked because, Oprah's put on a lot of people. That's the other thing about her. It's not just about the products that she can propel, but it's the personalities as well. And someone like Dr. Phil becomes a huge deal. He has oh my gosh, I can't remember how many times he was on her show, and then which creates his own spin-off show as well, the Dr. Phil show, which I think is still going on, to my knowledge. And so, she can create the careers of people, and this is that moment for Dr. Phil.
Yeah, so he was originally a kind of jury selection consultant behind the scenes, first part of her legal consulting team in 1995-96. But then, she basically kind of brings him on the show and credits him with helping her win and turns him into a star. And, talk about the sort of tricky nature of expertise. He is now just a doctor, right? And all of a sudden, he has a particular expertise when he starts, and now he's just out there he's Dr. Phil. He gets to say whatever he wants.
Pretty much.
Much like another person who she elevated, Dr. Oz.
Dr. Oz, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. Doctors and Oprah, yeah.
I will say, if we can end on a positive note for the beef industry,
please,
is that I think that not long after this, you do see a movement for grass-fed cows, for sort of, I mean, this comes a little later, but it's the beginnings of the buy local movement and the organic movement and the desire for people to have clean food, that if you're going to eat beef, it should be grass-fed, it should be treated humanely, it should be, handled in a particular way. And I think this goes back to, one of the episodes we did earlier on the ASPCA about animal treatment and, that animals should not be fed, certainly not vegetarian animals should not be fed meat particles. So I do think that there's something about this too that causes a shift in the way we think about consuming meat.
Yeah, a really important shift in bringing animal welfare to the conversation about the animals that we eat. which is something that, as you're pointing out, has been burgeoning in recent years alongside animal rights organizations, which are focused more on animals having independent rights and deserving not to be eaten at all.
Final question, Kellie, do we know, is Oprah still a vegetarian, or does she still not eat meat? What's the story there?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
All I know she's an ambassador for like WW. Matter of fact, she's one of the owners of what was formerly known as Weight Watchers. But that's a good question. I don't know.
I think quick Googling tells me that she is not.
I was about to say, I don't
currently vegetarian, but that she nevertheless is considered a sort of champion of veganism and the vegan movement just because she has talked about it so publicly. But I don't know if she personally, she's done a bunch of cleanses and stuff like that.
I was going to say that on her show. I remember they had the whole staff go vegan for a week, and then they made vegan Tuesdays at her headquarters. But I don't believe so. I think she still eats meat.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we are going to leave it there. That was really fun. Again, I think there's so much more to this story. Maybe we'll find another reason to talk about it, or certainly talk about Oprah again. We could just do a whole series on Oprah. All right. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Hi, everybody. What my reaction is that free speech not only lives, it rocks. I want to thank my team. I couldn't have gotten through this without them. Chip Babcock and Nancy Hamilton, Leslie Ashby, Phil McGraw. I couldn't have gotten through this. This has been a very difficult and stressful time. I feel like I've come through it a stronger person. We all.
Radiotopia from PRX.